My name is Cheryl Davis. I am the director of the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, and along with my colleagues here today, we're going to talk a little bit about how we leverage storytelling both for data collection, but also for policy change, and really centering community voices in the work that we do when we do our work in terms of community engaged learning, being very intentional about principal investigators and all the language therein, to also include the partners that we work with, right? They're not just folks that we research, they're actually our co-investigators or the folks that inform that work and that we do this shared. So I'm going to start with 2 short video clips that highlight one of our partners that Zena will then introduce herself and share a little bit about. So I'll kind of help as we move forward and with the framing, and then each individual will introduce themselves. So the first 2 clips are from a project that we'll talk a little bit about later, but they highlight community story and the information that we needed to tell corrective narrative storytelling. So the places that will be highlighted in these videos are traditionally Black spaces, but have had a negative connotation to them. And so this was an opportunity to think about like how community can tell the story and help us do it in a way that is respectful and honors the culture and the history of the community.
A little to the right, Doctor. Yep, one more, right there.
Yeah, because you it's not doing the sound. Well, how about we start with Zena before we figure that out. Thank you for your patience.
So, how many times a day does this happen? I have a session. It's like, oh, okay. Get the support, get the tech. Okay. I will not need sound, so. Okay. Oh, I have to do it this way. Still some coordination skills. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about here is qualitative research. And in this, Dave's just introduced this as project where these projects are a result of collaboration between government, community-based organizations, academia. It's all about, as in our about shifting the narrative and shifting also the ways in which we present stories of our communities. And when we do research that is intended for policy, that is intended for government, with government, it tends to be so much about numbers. Numbers always matter. Can we show the right numbers in order so we can know that we can get the right numbers in check, and so we can get funding, whatever percent is, and how much of this and these things, and so it's always about numbers. But what is, and it, quantitative research often has its place, it has its value, but we don't really fall in love with statistics as human beings. love the story. That's really what persuades us. So that's where the power of qualitative research really lies, adding color to numbers, but also adding insights into the human experiences and perceptions and behavior and development. So, in this approach, what we're doing here is in shifting these narratives and in trying to present something that is really new and deep and that really tells the stories of the community. We involve these different types of qualitative research methods, and it really depends on what community partners we are working with and what really feels right for the community partner. So it can be ethnography, it can be grounded theory, it can be case studies, it can be narrative analysis, it can be phenomenology. It is really just a repertoire of different kinds of research, and it's really about what is really important to the community, and what is the way for them to really tell the story about themselves that they want to share. So in that work, we're kind of, it's both. So it's sort of it's sort of two-pronged. So there is the work of research itself, and then there is the support and the work of supporting the research of the community organizations who want to do it or learn to do it themselves. And that can take shape and form of all these different tools and methods, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And in particular, one of the things that I particularly like to work with is photo voice, because it really captures, it allows the participants to really kind of capture their stories in a way that is much more creative and much more sort of visual. And some of the things that we're going to be sharing are going to speak a little bit more kind of illustratively about that. But what we're trying to get is, so what these stories really are about, and I like to think about, I like to think about human development in terms of that. I like to this image of the healing, because it kind of really represents how we develop as individuals is always really intertwined with our environments. So how our environment shapes us, and we shape our environment in return. So if we think about understanding how communities live and breathe and how they develop individuals, it's really necessary to think in that way, to think about that impact of community on the individual and the other way around. And for research to really show us the story, we want to really think about, so only beyond those kinds of numbers, we want to think about why people think what they think, why they say what they say, how it feels, and how do we digest or interpret the world? So what are these different worldviews that inform our decisions and that inform how we communicate with each other, and how we also build our communities? So the other thing that's really important in this kind of research, and in this particularly as a larger, one of the larger sort of underlying themes of this work, and Dr. Lex Tufu-Birch will tell you a little bit more afterwards about the Dreamkeeper Initiative, is also about, in this idea of shifting the narrative, there's the idea of healing. There's the idea of healing communities, especially communities that have been exposed to trauma, and that have been, in the way that they have been developmentally impacted by so much trauma. So talking about trauma and how that impacts communities and individuals and development, it's probably for another presentation, type of presentation. But what I wanted to point to is, what is the difference? What is the difference maker in terms of shifting or flipping the trauma experience into that post-traumatic growth? How do we go from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth? And I just wanted to kind of show you this, because it really matters in terms of the example that I want to give from one piece of research that we're doing. So what the research shows, what the trauma research shows, that post-traumatic error, essentially five domains where post-traumatic growth shows up as a likely outcome, or where resilience shows up. And people tend to go into post-traumatic growth if they are exposed to new possibilities, if they are exposed to increased personal strength, if they have enhanced relationships, if they can have a new appreciation of life, and if there is a chance for spiritual growth. So this just right here is a different way, and a deeper way of looking at what are some of the questions that we might want to be looking into when we're thinking about how do communities heal, and what are some of the tools that we may want to provide them in order to heal. So one of the things that I wanted to just really briefly share with you is work that we're doing with one of our partners, and it's just one little snippet of a piece of research that is still in development and that is kind of collaborated and layered, in that it involves qualitative research on one side and also documentary filmmaking that sort of intertwine to tell the story in a very different way. So City-E-T San Francisco is an organization that is a subdivision of Dusty Fishing as well, a nonprofit organization that is committed to uplifting youth from disadvantaged neighborhoods in San Francisco with educational enrichment programs. And City-E-T is centered specifically to transitional age youth who are suffering from lack of exposure to and guidance for entry-level education to career pathways and opportunities. So what City-E-T does is trains young people to prepare them for work for being paramedics, for work with firefighters, and for really kind of getting them on a career track into the medical field as well. And their approach is very different in that it involves this kind of, also involves wraparound care. So it's not just about training and education, it's also about the community, that educational space, and providing support, and support that is really kind of wide-ranging support, in that these young people build a community of their own while they are training, and the support they receive from the organization really goes very deep. And what I wanted to share with you is just a couple of snippets of what we're doing with the City-E-T is qualitative reviews and focus groups and photo voice-based research that is then paralleled with documentary filmmaking that is done by our partner Citizen Film, that we're gonna share a few clips from Citizen Film's other projects to kind of give you an idea of what kind of work they do. But what really comes out is really important is, and here I'm just showing a couple of quotes from two of the young participants to share how they feel about being part of this organization. So up here, this young man says, "What matters to me also is that when people from community call for help and need help, someone who looks like me shows up and says, 'I got you.'" And this young woman below says, "As a woman of color, I'm always like in some story is being told about me. Well, I want to be the one telling it, and I want to say that I didn't succeed despite my story, but because of it." And so really what we're looking for is to make the kind of an impact that ripples, that has a very wide ripple effect. And within that, to do the research that involves researchers as well, reflecting on themselves and reflecting on their positionality and how they're coming into this partnership with the community to tell these stories, how that reflects on communities and how it helps communities, what kind of impact that leads to in terms of policies, and of course, how it advances our knowledge, which is kind of what we're all here for to discuss. And I will.
So I think Zena has been our partner, really working with our community partners to unpack and help tell their story in a way that government can appreciate, taking narrative, the story, and doing that level of work. So while we're working on this next phase, I'm going to actually ask Rodney Jackson, who is one of our partners, and he's going to do a performance. And then we'll, while you're doing that, we're going to get the sound and things checked out. So
Sounds good.
Give it up to Rodney.
I actually wanted to use some of that, but hey, this is live, right? I'm Rodney Jackson. I'm the co-founder and artistic director of San Francisco Bay Area Theater Company, SF-BACO. And we've been so blessed by the Dream Keepers Initiative because they've allowed us to step into who we are, to support the artists who really mean the most to us in San Francisco, to really shift that narrative. We were inspired by a great man, you probably all know who he is. His name is Langston Hughes. His words, "I too am America," speak volumes then and now. In San Francisco, I grew up as a little boy in a place that didn't have a lot of black people, but I met this incredible man by the name of Othello Jefferson, and you know like his name is probably black. He was the organist and the piano player for a lot of the local churches, and he taught me everything I knew about music and singing. And a couple years ago, he had just had his second baby, and he was reading this book of poetry to her. This book of poetry by Langston and other prolific writers of color. And he was doing all this, he started singing these songs that I actually sing. And now we're gonna sing it together. I'm gonna teach you guys all of this, and we're gonna all sing it together, okay? We're gonna split up a little bit. It goes a little bit. I'm gonna need y'all help. No, can you go to the slideshow? Oh yeah, play that, play. Just play. So these are some of my artists from the San Francisco Bay Area Theater Company. I think it's important to have some motion to stimulate what we're talking about, who we're talking about, and why we're talking about them. This is from our production. Don't even make it big, just play it. We'll just do like that. It's just a slideshow of some of the movement and dance that we had on stage. These are because of the resources, my company can then do this. This is a full tether. It's like an intercostal muscle down to the T. You know, your spine needs everything in order to stand up straight. So this is like our base, and then from that we get the tip, and all the things in between. But right now, we're gonna sing a little bit. It goes like this. I'm gonna sing the whole thing, and then y'all sing with me, all right? All right? Yes. I too sing. I too sing. Oh, I too sing. Sing America. So he played this on his organ, and it's a little dark, like, I too sing. Give me this thing. So now you're gonna join me. You guys are gonna be my first group. You're gonna sing, I too sing. And then right after that, y'all are gonna join me. They sing, I too sing. And then we're gonna sing, oh, I too sing. And then all together, we're gonna sing, sing America. I'm gonna do it one more time. We're gonna, I too sing. Y'all gonna sing. I too sing, oh, I too sing, sing America. Very good, now we gotta stand up. Because I can't have all my eyes up here doing all this, and y'all sit down, it don't work like that. So, when you say I, put your hand in your heart. When you say sing, open it up to the world. Whenever you sing, ready? This group first, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, here we go. I too sing, very good. I too sing, yeah. Oh, I too sing. All together. Sing America. One more time. 5, 6, here we go. I too sing, yes. I too sing. Oh, I too sing. Sing America. Beautiful. Give us some America. Yes. How do we meet artists where they are? How do we meet artists where they are? How do we meet Black artists where they are? Artists of color where they are. During the pandemic, what did you all turn to? A book? Music. Art. Drawing. Culinary arts. You took time to reflect on artistry. If you're watching something, theater became more accessible online. How do we meet those artists where they are? How do we reciprocate the fuel that was given to us during the time when we were at our lowest? The Dreamkeepers Initiative. We're leveraging it. We're balancing it. We're meeting our artists and our community and our people where they are. And through music like this, it's like my company had to go all the way back to the Harlem Renaissance, find Langston, who's been saying this for decades, in order to meet this moment. The pandemic was a highlighting and illuminating moment for a lot of us, especially for artists of color. And during this time of resurging, we were blessed to have the resources to have our voices amplified. And now I'm going to sing one more song. I'm going to get Ooh, got me sweating. Can I come with water? No, it's not the freedom. No, it's no. I think it's over here. Is it over here?
It was, yes.
Oh no. I'm gonna sing out. All right, it's based off of the same lyrics. I'll speak the first lyrics. She knows Lindsay's poems. I am the darker brother. They say to eat in the kitchen when company comes. In the kitchen when company comes. Roll up. Mm-hmm. But I laugh and eat well. I laugh and eat well. And I grow strong. I grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen there. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. Because this Dreamkeepers Initiative has taught us that I too am America. Thank you all so much. Now this clip, hopefully the sound works for us. So this clip was from the show. We created our own song, and it was called My Freedom. Based off of an old Negro spiritual, it's a new influences. This song is called My Freedom. I'm going to play it for us. Yeah.
I am a stranger traveling through this land of woe. Yet I am ready to the promised land I know. Nobody knows all the troubles I see. Though my way may be rough, my way may be worn, but I will walk in victory. Because through dangers, through toils and snares, I have already come through sickness and pain. I know that I've already won. Oh, my freedom. Oh, freedom, Lord, what it is. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, take away from you. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, hey, if you stay of your mind, and we will fly for our life, we will leave no one behind, because the burning deep inside my soul. God, I am trying to my goal. My walk in liberty. I believe I will find my freedom. My freedom. You will be free to walk in liberty. I believe I will find my freedom. Oh, my freedom. We will be free to walk in liberty. I believe I will find my freedom.
So another round for Ryan. So what I will do now is that I realize we kind of started with kind of in the middle of some of this. So what I will do is go get back and give context to how Rodney has been funded and the other programs and why that process to where we got to here. So I'll go and then Dr. Sai, Ida Leah Tutufu Birch, because it'll give a little bit more context for the performance and the presentations that have happened. So this idea of the corrective narrative storytelling really came for us because in San Francisco, the Black population typically has been viewed in a negative connotation because it's so small and that it's disproportionately homeless and poor, and even though it's less than 6% of the population, still accept the majority of folks who are incarcerated. And so part of this was how do we make to story from the vantage point and the point of view of community. And so really unpacking the difference between knowledge and truth and the Black experience in that process. And so what we heard in the community process was there's no shortage of data. Like we know all the things, right? 47% of the people incarcerated are Black, and 30-something% of the students who are suspended. Like there was a lot of data being shared. People didn't appreciate the data being shared because it was being shared with somebody else's truth or someone else's perspective on why those numbers existed. And so there had been a series of reports, all of them highlighting what was wrong with Black in San Francisco, not really celebrating their joy or recognizing their humanity. So there had been a report looked at from 1964 to 1990 called the Agenda, which looked at recommendations that were made in 1964 that said this is what you should do to make things better for Black folks that had been ignored, up to 2009 when now Governor Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco, and he commissioned a report to understand why so many Black people were leaving San Francisco. Again, the data was collected. There was a lot of documentation of inequity, but not a lot of commitment or resources to address the inequities. And so this was the piece where folks were saying to us, like, this is the data, right? Like, we know that less than 6% of the population is Black, but the data also showed that the Black population is the only one to consistently decrease in San Francisco while everyone else continues to increase. And so why is it that that population is shrinking? And then the other things that people talked about, the numbers were shrinking, but yet we still saw that the majority of homeless were Black, the majority of folks that were incarcerated were Black, and even though the school district population is only 7% Black, over 30% of the suspensions, expulsions, and disciplinary actions were Black students. And so folks were like, we are tired of hearing that data and that story. We don't want that to be the only thing that the city talks about. And so they were saying, like, the truth is not always relevant or connected to the data or the knowledge that the city was doing. And so part of this was like, how do we correct the storytelling that's going on, the corrective narrative, what are we doing? And so the community said was that we want to disrupt systems of inequity. We want to be very intentional about that. And we don't want to talk about what's wrong with Black people. We want to focus on how we change the systems, because the systems are what's wrong, not the people. And so this was, again, this piece around the data that they kept talking about. Like, it always kept coming back to the data and not about the people. And so the Black experience was like, how are we now going to address the people and share that story and move beyond just the data? And that's some of why the videos and the work that Rodney is doing was so important, because that was a way to talk about the need for freedom without it being the burden of what it is that is holding people down or the shackles that hold them down in that context. So what we did is in 2020, after all the things that happened with George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, and the marches that were happening, we were fortunate that Mayor Breed in San Francisco and then President of the Board of Supervisors committed and went through the process to say they were going to give money specifically for Black people in San Francisco, but it was going to be informed not by city bureaucracy, but by the community. And so part of what you've seen and what we talked about today is based on that process, right? And so we did surveys and emails and feedback and engagement. So there were 60 plus community meetings that I personally sat in on, facilitated, and took all the data from that to inform what is now the Dreamkeeper Initiative. So that process was totally community-led and community-driven. And it's just a snapshot of some of the meetings that we had. We also had meetings with young people. We had intentional meetings with folks in public housing. We had meetings there for 1 month. Every Tuesday, I had 4 meetings a day. And then I had meetings on the weekends. So that folks who couldn't come in the morning could come in the evening. People who couldn't come on the week, during the week could come on the weekend. So we really wanted to make sure that we could hear all the voices from folks. And so what we heard from community in that process, the areas that they wanted to uplift, community voice and engagement is critical, and so they wanted that to be centered. The investments should go towards a Black agenda that's created and defined by Black people, and that lived experience is subject matter expertise. That was the main thing they wanted. So often when we invest as a city, subject matter experts means that they had to have a degree behind their name, and they had to have years of collecting and analyzing data. And they really pushed us to do a different shift, and they wanted public-private partnerships. And so the 4 things that really resonated that align with why storytelling is so important is the activation, the collaboration, inspiration, and transformation. That's really what we heard from community, and that's embedded also in research practices and policies. And so they were like, when we tell you what happens, we want this story that we're sharing with you, not to just be like you going, oh my God, I'm so sorry that's happened to you. We wanted to activate you. We wanted to transform how policies are done. We want you to collaborate with us, and we want you to be inspired to do things differently. Like, that is what we heard. And so through that process, they also said we want the opportunity for community to lead, which means that the folks who are doing the work should be in front of it, and it shouldn't be based on people who work for the city. And so you'll hear from John, you've already heard from Rodney, and then I'll share a little clip of Sophie's work. It should be focused on community building, and that it should be focused on systems change. Again, not focusing on why people are bad, but focusing on why the system is ineffective and not doing what we want it to do versus what many argue it is actually doing exactly what it's meant to do. These were the areas that they wanted community leadership in terms of justice reform, in terms of art and culture. They really wanted us to make sure that we saw art and culture and culturally affirming spaces and practices as a strategy to actually improve outcomes, and that it shouldn't be kind of like what we see in schools, this extracurricular. It should be mainstreamed, and it should be center of the work. And economic justice and youth education were all components here. And sorry, this is hard to see, but it basically just outlines the practices and places where they wanted it to go. One was pipelines, career pathways. It was again about culturally affirming spaces, entrepreneurial opportunities. And this is it again, rethinking how we talk about how the funding would be allocated, which was really hard, I would say, for my city partners, for us to shift and think about it in terms of pipelines, housing, and transgender initiatives. And this, the last two, the two on the far left, well, actually the whole bottom row was hard for the city. Black theater companies did not seem like a way that we should be investing money, but folks felt it was very important for the storytelling, for the corrective narrative shift, for this idea of like centering Black experience. Early ed, we've talked a lot about like that's where you invest, and if you can make a huge difference, I see Dr. Nunley here, like it's actually where you get the most bang for your buck. But people want to always go to the end and focus on like the current situation and focus on incarceration, and that, not that folks don't want to do that, but if we do more on the front end, we actually will have fewer problems on the back end. And then the capacity building. We kept hearing that they didn't want to give money to Black people because they didn't know how to manage it or they didn't trust them with it. And so it became more about like how do we address that issue and invest in people that actually have the relationships, the lived experience, and the credible, they're credible messengers in community. And so that was the one thing that community kept stressing. So telling the story, embedding this work has been the hardest part for us to always keep going back to keep shifting. And so that, I'll go back now to the clips for you, but that just gives the context of we made a conscious decision to say 60 million, we're now at $180 million over the last 3 years. and that it should be just as important to send people to the theater as it is to send to school, right? Because they really share similar outcomes when we think about people feeling seen, feeling valued, feeling heard, and so that is part of this. And then Dr. Sy will give you more of where we are now. John Henry is one who has been leading this work and doing the space for people to just come and talk and have that space to do that. But we've seen Sy share what the impacts of the work has been. So I'll go ahead. Again, narrative shift, corrective narrative storytelling, telling the story with a different lens. So this is one that talks about the 280 freeway, which ran through a city, ran through the community, and impacted it negatively. And this is this person's story.
My family has slowly been losing their land for years. This is something I have to do for them. I know too much history of how land and real estate has been used against Black people. I have to do something to fix it.
And so Sophie, who Zena referenced, is doing documentaries with our community members. So the 280 project took this lighted space, and this young man turned it into a winery. And so it's changing the narrative of how people see what's happening in a video that people will see versus a report that people may never.
Mayday Calling is a junk removal business based in San Francisco. We service residential customers, commercial customers, and we pride ourselves in being efficient, being friendly, being knowledgeable about what we do. A lot of our customers call us back and refer us to other people, so that's what makes us special.
Where'd you come up with the name, Mayday?
It's a distress call, right? For whatever reason, a lot of people call me and want to use my service. There's always some urgency behind it. They need stuff going right away, and then hanging on to it and wrestling back and forth with letting it go. So when we finally come in and do our thing, there's a lot of relief.
There's something you want to say to other Black entrepreneurs that are wanting to start a business?
I would say do it. Wherever they want to go is possible. They can control, their destiny too.
Good morning. Good morning. So, as Director Davis mentioned, my name is Dr. Saida Lantatifu Birch, and I'm a Black and Indigenous Samoan daughter, wife, sister, friend, organizer, disruptor of anti-Black racism and systems rooted in white supremacist ideology. And I also serve as the director of the Dream Keeper Initiative with the San Francisco Human Rights Commission. I was expecting Dr. Davis to share a poem because, okay, so I won't do that. And normal, I sing a song because I still have morning voice. But I will say in the spirit of storytelling and a corrective narrative, a story that I always like to share is one about wealth building, especially in a city like San Francisco. So in 1997, Rose, a single Black mother, to purchase her piece of what she thought was the American dream. She put $3,500 down on a home in San Francisco's Hunters Point neighborhood near the shipyard. Well, in 2009, without having knowledge of how to navigate financial difficulties, that home was extracted, that wealth was extracted as a result of the recession. In 2019, Fia, Asian single mother of 3 at the time, sought her piece of the American dream and wanted to purchase a home in San Francisco's Hunters Point neighborhood at the Shipyard. $30,000 short, she made a phone call to her aunt, and her aunt was ready and willing to oblige and provided that $30,000 toward her down payment to purchase her home where she lives today. And I always ask the question, well, what was the difference between Rose and Fia? It was a rich aunt or a network. And so the Dreamkeeper Initiative is about creating a net that works for Black San Franciscans. And Director Davis already set the context in terms of it being a response into the summer of 2020, but we will focus on the joy today in which the Dreamkeeper Initiative envisions an environment where Black San Franciscans can experience prosperity, liberation, and can imagine a future in San Francisco. And how we do that is by investing and ensuring across generations, Black San Franciscans are experiencing joy and feelings of safety, are advancing educationally and economically, and are holistically healthy and thriving. A lot of words on this slide, but in short, if this could be a visual, I would liken it to a honeycomb. Yesterday, we had an opportunity to hear from some of our research and evaluation partners, Dr. Nunley, who is in the room from the Media Research Institute, changing the face of research, telling our own stories. Yesterday, I think it was referenced that we were tired of being researched, so we became the researchers, which is why many of us on the stage and in the room are practitioners. When folks ask me, why did I get my doctorate, I said, why not? And because I wanted people to call me doctor. You know, there's nothing more to that, but I would liken this work to a honeycomb. And what's on this slide are what we call foundational actions. These foundational actions really get at the root of a lot of what those dozens of reports said that what was wrong with Black folks in San Francisco. And so our hypothesis is if we invest in these areas, then we know we can experience and get to that place of prosperity, of liberation, and of imagining a future in San Francisco. So in no particular order, building culturally affirming spaces that celebrate Black folks. When people come to San Francisco, whether it's a new community that's being built or a cultural corridor, how is Black culture being shared and exchanged, being elevated and amplified, that would show that we are still there in San Francisco. I'm sure many of us in this room may not believe that Black folks are in San Francisco, but we are, and we are coming back, and we invite folks back. The second is growing financial health and economic well-being. The 2 clips that you saw, Mayday Hauling and the 280 Project, are representative of entrepreneurs who are building that economic development in community. If you would have told me, years ago as a child that there would be a winery next door to, at least I call them the projects because I grew up in the projects, but to a public housing community, I wouldn't have believed it. But there is a vineyard there. And so investing in that financial growth piece. The third is that every Black person has access to culturally relevant social emotional wellness activities so that our mental health, physical health practitioners are not only well-skilled and trained, but also have that lived experience and can relate to the families and individuals that they're working with. We prioritize positive images and stories of Black-led organizations and Black-centered narratives that highlight the beauty and brilliance of Black folks, which is what today is about writing history and writing W-R-I-T, and however else you spell writing, I-N-G, writing history, and elevating a corrective narrative, one that makes up what many of us experience, that joy piece. We ensure that Black-led and Black-serving organizations are financially solvent and can scale services if they would like, what many folks identify as capacity building. And then finally, that all learners have access to culturally affirming curriculum and academic experiences outside of traditional educational institutions, so public school systems. We know that much of our teachings about culture, and we know with the attack on education today, specifically history in this country, that it's important to elevate that curriculum. So I'm not gonna go into details about this because I would much rather you hear from folks who are implementing the work. But just to say, yesterday we went into details about this evaluation work. We thought that in order to change systems, it was important to disrupt the way in which the system collects its data and evaluate it itself, and to bring in community members to tell us what is going right, what is going wrong, any challenges. And surprisingly, community said the Dreamkeeper Initiative is doing well in its first 2 years. And so we made an intentional partnership with community members who served as the researchers and evaluators for our 2-year impact report to inform and make the case for how we can continue to do the work. And so I draw your attention to the words in blue to invite the voices of community members into this space, but these are direct quotes from some of the evaluated work. Again, there are a lot of words and a lot more slides that I won't go through, but we pay a particular attention to arts and culture, and those participants who voiced their opinions of the Dreamkeeper Initiative, sharing that the funds allowed them to take part in conversation, that without the structure, a lot of the work that Red Team participated in may not happen. In the work that we do with families, folks are saying this money gave people a reason to live again, to believe that something actually gave a damn. And for decades, Black children were failed year after year. And for the first time, we are providing an equitable framework to support the Black community related to economic mobility. A lot of our entrepreneurs and community members agreed that Sell Black, which is an effort to grow Black businesses in the city, boosted hope and a thriving business, and beautiful pictures of products on websites. And there are plenty of storefronts that we are inviting back to San Francisco. Participating in the DKI training reestablished a sense of community and broadened the network of more incredible Black birth workers in the Bay Area, bridging gaps in accessibility in the health and wellness space. And then home ownership, which is of great significance in the city, inviting Black homeowners and increasing the number of Black homeowners who've been able to benefit. So I actually didn't believe that I could ever own a home in San Francisco due to the prices, so this was a huge plus in their life. And finally, with respect to mini grants, which is an effort to put pockets to fund ideas, any creative ideas that community members have, they can get mini grants to just try it out or to host an event. Unlike other programs, the mini grant program was unapologetically Black and uplifted the community and trusted community leaders, and it honored my intelligence and Blackness and didn't limit me in terms of where I could go. So those are the words of community members that I wanted to invite in terms of we accept all forms of data, not just numbers, but stories, video telling, because we know Black folks are representative of all of that. Our culture is whole, and so with that, I'm going to step aside and turn it back to Dr. Davis.
So the final two presenters will kind of talk again in terms of story. And so what Sai said, when we think about corrective narrative storytelling and how we do that, I actually started my career as a kindergarten teacher, and over the years have progressed and gone back to school to get my degree. But the idea of how we think about story, how we think about the work. One of my favorite authors or poets is Eloise Greenfield, and she wrote one called Themes, and have really used that in terms of how we have this conversation. It says, walk to the corner, to the store, bought me candy, ain't got it no more, ain't got it no more. Went to the beach, laid on the shore, built me a sandcastle, ain't got it no more, ain't got it no more. Went to the kitchen, laid on the floor, wrote me a poem, still got it, still got it. And the idea and notion that we were trying to do in terms of this corrective storytelling is how do we really think about how people tell their stories? And so in that, trying to have folks understand the story of economic justice, because she talked about she walked to the store, bought her something, right? The ability to go to the store and buy what you want for yourself and not be judged about whether you had enough money or not. The ability to have rest and leisure, to be able to go to the beach, play and build a sandcastle, right? But also the ability to go to the kitchen, to have a kitchen, to have a floor to lay on, to have the materials to write something, to have the mind to be able to write something. Yeah. So the idea that we have to unpack what people are saying to us in order to be able to do the work and to rethink that, right? So a lot of times, like there's another one that she has that says, Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff, wasn't scared enough to either. Didn't come in this world to be no slave and didn't stay one either. And a lot of times we tell the story of Harriet Tubman, but we don't really tell the story of the tools that she used, right? And so part of this has been, how do we have corrective narrative storytelling? Because we say that Harriet went back to save folks, but we don't say that she was saying, meeting tonight, meeting tonight. Right, that she was singing the songs to be able to get folks. She wasn't passing out flyers. She wasn't saying, meet me at the campground. She wasn't surveying people and saying, how many people will join me and run away to freedom? And so that is the piece that we've been doing, is we have to shift and recenter and think about like how we see what the community is doing and how we value that. And so I just wanted to give that context as we have like our final two folks, because we may look at it and be like, oh, they're just talking to people. But they're talking to people and they're gathering information that tells us volumes and gives us more information than we could ever get if we just add a focus group or if we just knock on somebody's door and said, fill out this survey. Right. So it was really about like how we correct our not just the narrative of the story that we tell, but how we collect the stories themselves. So I want to give you
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Henry. I'm the founder and executive director of both sides of the conversation. I'm one of the Dreamkeeper Initiative grantees. Because of Dreamkeeper, what we do as a media nonprofit and what we do as community engagement really impacts our community. Our mission is to analyze the needs of Black and brown community, criticize the barriers that impact the advancement of our community, and then mobilize to support the community. Our vision is an open place for open dialogue and conversation through our social media, our platform. We create a space so that Black folks can have their voices heard and amplified and not silenced by media and other folks. The next slide is a little bit about me, born and raised in San Francisco, impacted by the racial school system that we have, born and raised in one of the most challenging communities, social, emotional, and I was part of that process of the harm I was caused not only by the city, but the things that took place in our community. The Dreaming Forward, part of Dreamkeeper, helped birth both sides of the conversation because of the vision of our mayor, the leadership of Director Davis and Dr. Sy. We were able to push forward and do the work that we were doing with our community, with community engagement, advanced planning, and having conversation and assessing what's going on in our community during the COVID time. This organization was created during COVID time, but also the work that I was doing in community before COVID for many years of working with young people who are incarcerated in the San Francisco juvenile hall system. But basically, with this initiative, we were able to mobilize to provide conscious community outreach and a platform for storytelling and open dialogue, produce digital media marketing and resources for our community. One of the biggest challenges that we had in San Francisco, folks felt disconnected. A lot of times in our cities and counties, there's resources or things, folks just don't know how to access it. Some people do, and then others don't. So we were able to create a way that we can have centralized communication to make sure that all of the events, the resources actually get to the people in our community, and they have a way to participate and be a part of it. Fulfilling our mission is really about teamwork. All of our community organizations, people that's in our organization are volunteers from the community who wanted to give back and see something different in our community with a positive approach. So we bring a number of folks in from community that want to see change to help put our mission forward. So with our digital media platform, we're able to create resources during COVID. COVID shut down, there was no way for people to have town hall meetings, to have ways to congregate, talk about what was impacting the community, and also a way to have conversations about some of the topics that would impact our community negatively. So we have a platform on Sunday where we call it Sunday Conversation, where Black folks can come on and talk about topics that impact our community through a podcast. Also, we have a podcast segment on Tuesdays called Hidden Gems, where we highlight Black and brown businesses. One of the problems that we saw during COVID was a lot of Black businesses were open, but people wasn't doing their information where they was closed or they wasn't around. So what we do is use that segment to uplift Black businesses, to get people in the community to spend their dollars Black. Also, we use it to highlight community leaders and organizations. A lot of what we heard during COVID was people wasn't being recognized. So we wanted to make sure we gave them their flowers while they're here for doing the work in our community. And then thirdly, we have Educational Thursdays. One of the needs that we found in all the disparities was going on with COVID is like a lot of people in our community didn't have access to information. So we wanted to be intentional to make sure we had a space where folks would come and get information on financial literacy, mental health services, and things of that nature. So we're utilizing that space to really bring awareness and education to our community. So with the Dreamkeeper initiative, it's really helped us not only financially to be able to do what we do, but to really work in community and find all the disparities and issues that are going on. Sometimes in Black communities, trust is a big thing. Because we have the leverage and the understanding of the community, we're able to dialogue and pull out a lot of information from community folks of what's going on, and then translate that into change for community. Wealth building, we have a literacy program. We teach folks how to get out of debt and build wealth. And then a lot of Black businesses have came on and just learned little steps and tools how to build budgets and how to really advance financially. Our Both Sides of the Hill mentor programming is really about mentoring young people, equipping them, giving them the tools so that they can be effective in the community. You know, a lot of young people that we work with are in the justice system, but giving them an opportunity to come out and be a part of the community. I'm going to have to push through the slide. Some of the metrics that we've done over the past few years, we created racial equity awareness. We've done unhoused feeds, participated in a number of community events, DKI events, and also able to bring that information back to the community. And then the slides coming up is just a little bit about some of the events that we were able to put on with Dreamkeeper, some of the other organizations, some of the leaders who are doing work. So we've been out in the community, just bringing information, just highlighting the work that is going on, because a lot of times folks say community organizations are not impacted, so we just brought a little bit of like what that looks like to you all. We've had a number of community engagement events all over the city, STEM events, bowling events, just things, you know, coming out of COVID was so hard for our community to get socially back connected. So a big part of Dreamkeeper is really bringing communities, getting them out, giving them resources, being very impactful. So I'm trying to get to these. We've done a number of unhoused feeds, bringing food to our unhoused folks. As Director Davis mentioned earlier, we have a large population of unhoused folks in San Francisco and incarcerated. So we've been able to bring, you know, financial resources to the community, food, clothing, and just bring services to our people that's unhoused. Can't forget about our unhoused brothers and sisters. The Dreamkeeper has definitely gave access to a lot of community folks to events, finding resources. There's a number of some of the events that's taking place. Some of the impact, we've had 350 live weekly shows, over 20,000 meals distributed, 100 youth impacted. During the holidays, over 3,700 toys and supplies distributed to the program. A number of volunteer hours. We have over about 40,000 volunteer hours, so people do care about community. We've had about 72,000 social media memberships and 200 re-entry participants. This is just some of the testimonies from community, talk about the work that we've been doing. And then we have a little quick video, I think. see, I have a quick video that I want to use. Some of the pictures from some of our, this is our both sides of the conversation team. Again, all black folks, it's our brown community partnership, doing stuff with black and brown community.
So while John's sorting that out, my name is Anthony Jones. I'm on the Human Rights Commission team. And one of the very brief things that I wanted to kind of bring up about corrective storytelling, you know, I'm thinking about my grandmother, right, who's on the last leg of her journey. So, you know, I'm thinking about how I grew up with her and just witnessing her story and being a part of her story corrected the narrative before I even got there. You know, going to church with her on Sundays, her waking up that accountability, going to 3 church services, helping her feed the homeless as a young, even preteen while in middle school, and being there with her, supporting her after school program while I was still in high school. It allowed me to correct the narrative before I got it. So before I seen the images of, you know, folks looking like me, young black men dressing up in a certain way, or you're supposed to do this, or you're destined for jail. I said, no, I'm destined to be like my grandmother and helping feed the homeless. I'm destined to be like my grandmother, who brought me into public meetings and who introduced me to elected officials. That's how I got my connection and was able to join the Youth Commission, setting the foundation of public service in me early. So not only is it important to remind ourselves about corrective storytelling, but also realize that we've been in corrective storytelling already. That's why some of us are here today. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to John. She's playing some corrective storytelling. But while we get this video set up, which I think is important for us to see, wanted to see if anyone had some questions for our amazing presenters. And let's give them a round of applause. We're gonna get back to the video, but I had to definitely make sure we gave some love to these amazing presenters. But we got questions, Dr.
This is more comment. It's more comment. It's so good to see good stuff about San Francisco. Because we got a bad rap. So, yay, thank you. Thank you.
I know between reparations and violence, that's all the national news.
Just that hidden story.
I have a comment. My name is Monica Swope. I really love what you shared because so much profit is on Black trauma, Black pain, and I love how Black joy is at the center and centering the story because there's so much more with the Black communities, the brown community, the BIPOC community that goes beyond the pain and the trauma. And I understand, I run an educational consulting company I founded. We're in our 10th year. I work with lots of not-for-profits, and I understand the money comes from telling the story of trauma and pain. Yeah. But all the more the agency behind the groups that you are representing, you know, as a non-for-profit who's, you know, sometimes competing for funds, should also share the other side about the asset building, the agency, the environment, and joy. And I also understand that sometimes those who are not part of the BIPOC community, they can wrap their head around the pain and the trauma, of individuals who have been marginalized, not by their own choice, but by themselves, we all the more have to make sure that they need to wrap their head around the assets that we bring, because this country would not have been built or sustained without the other individuals who have been pushed to the market. So thank you so much.
So greetings as well. I am Dr. Dawn Henderson, also here as a person that is advocating for community-driven approaches. I represent a nonprofit in Durham, North Carolina. We talk about activating dream potential in Black families. So as you were talking about this, I was like, this is resonating with my spirit. I am embodying all of this. The question I have is a question even for ourselves in our work. Is building the critical mass around the change that needs to be further implemented to continue to activate dream potential and continue to activate Black joy and to continue to activate Black thriving and not surviving. And given our political context, and we know how the system is designed, what are y'all's strategies, or if you can openly create the strategies that we collectively move forward in? Because we're trying to change, change the world, So, just want to ask.
That's a heavy question. I know Dr. Sy has responses as well, but I would say that there are a couple different things, and that's why partners like Dr. Zena is important, because we want to make sure that we're able to capture the story in the way that is authentic and hopeful and inspiring for community. And then we still have to, because the bureaucracy has not yet changed, we still have to translate it and get it to fit into the forms or the documents, right? So it's a both and for us right now. The other piece of that is, at the same time, we are really challenging the systems to rethink what success looks like. So that's the number one thing, right? Like, we have to say, and that it's not a one size fits all. If somebody has not been going to school for a year, success does not mean that they now go to school every day and they have an A. Like, that is not what success looks like. So success looks like they have been going for a year, and maybe now they went twice this week. And like, let's celebrate that, let's understand that. But sometimes, even for us, it's been challenging, because they're like, 22 people bought houses, that's not a big deal. But in the context of over the last 5 years, only 5 Black people have bought homes through the city's program. And then in 1 year, 22 people buy houses through the city's program. Like, we just have to reshape how we think about success. And that's where will and power comes in. So we have to take advantage of Mayor London Breed being mayor. Because if we don't document while she's here, then when she's gone, the next person coming in will say, let's go back to what was.
I completely agree, and I think I shared this a bit and continuously share this in part of the vision that was presented for the Dreamkeeper Initiative, that prosperity, liberation, and imagining a future in San Francisco, the prosperity piece being important in changing the culture to where we understand that for Black folks in San Francisco, prosperity is our birthright. And so that is the culture on the DKI team within the Human Rights Commission. That is the culture of the Human Rights Commission. And the way in which we're able to elevate that is, Director Davis did mention Mayor Breed. At the time that this initiative was established, in terms of political will, which is the question that came up yesterday, we had the Holy Trinity. We had like this unique opportunity where with Mayor Breed, a Black woman who shares her story openly about growing up in public housing and now becoming mayor. We had, who was then the president of our Board of Supervisors, Shaman Walton, a Black man who grew up in public housing and became the president of the Board of Supervisors, the first Black male president of the Board of Supervisors, who was impacted by the justice system and is now doing everything that he can to get back to San Francisco. And then we had Director Davis, who is the leader of the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, and had a strong affinity for San Francisco. And so these 3 leaders, Black leaders in San Francisco, were absolutely unapologetic. So that was a privilege for San Francisco to have in that moment. And I understand that across the country, as folks are embarking on the reparations question and how do we be more intentional about serving Black folks and creating the critical mass, all three of them had the backing of community. And I always say myself, being somebody from San Francisco, that matters too. To have an initiative, so one, naming what we mean. When we say we want to serve BIPOC and do equity work for the Dreamkeeper Initiative, we're talking about Black people, and we're unapologetically meaning that. And then we have people doing the work that are from San Francisco. I think more than half of the people on this panel are indigenous to San Francisco. And lastly, I think continuing to leverage the moment that we're in, the political moment we're in with the leadership that's currently in office, because we know it won't always be in place. And so the next phase of the work is to legislate and make permanent these, the funding and the investments.
Any other questions?
I appreciate, thank you so much to what everybody else has said. This is a very inspirational work. We are highlighting several of the partnerships that we have here. How many partners or community agencies are you working with as you're doing this work?
Yeah, basically. This initiative, if you're familiar with collective impact initiatives, the Human Rights Commission serves as the backbone agency, the lead agency, the coordinator. There are now 11 city departments who administer Dreamkeeper funds on our behalf, and 84 community organizations who are implementing the work. And I would say hundreds of individuals who receive those mini grants. So they're all a part of that. But I think Director Davis mentioned earlier what informed the process. Thousands of folks in community informed how we got to this point.
And folks can go to dreamkeepersf.org, and it lists out all the organizations, and it shows where the money is across the city.
Right. Transparency was very important. So you'll see which departments, how much money they have, which organizations are being funded, and how much they get. And we're about to add what they're being funded to do, because community said we want to know how people are spending that money.
Hi, just a quick question. So Dr. Babe, I'm representing a nonprofit in the DC metro area. So similar to the person who spoke earlier, and you spoke a little bit about working within the system, but for the grantees, I'd like to know what narrative you present to the grantees, so it does, especially you. So does it present like, so they're not tokenized? Like, what is the best language? What is the method that you use that you find
I mean, I'll let Anthony speak, because he does some of that with young people, but I will just say, it is, and for folks of, I don't know if it's racial or generational, but folks of a certain age, like, I know sometimes I have to remove myself, because I'm like, who you talking to, right? Like fix your face, or like don't suck your teeth, because like I can't move in that space. But that like creating those spaces for folks and removing, like there are some people that we have to uninvite, or that we do have to say like check how you show up in this room, because it becomes automatic to tokenize, and folks have become accustomed to being tokenized, right? So we see a lot of people who are really grateful to be the only one in the room.
And
so,
and the video is ready, but before we go to the video, just adding to what Director Davis was saying, Dr. Davis, this idea that the agency that community has been given, the autonomy and the platform to tell their stories, is something that a lot of them have never had. But in a progressive, so-called progressive city like San Francisco, the assumption is, oh, you're looking out for Black and brown communities. But historically, Black community members haven't been even approached to be even asked how you feel. So even through this process from day one, from building the Dreamkeeper initiative to having these engagements even with young people, this idea of giving them the platform to even share their stories and to hear their voice, for them it was like, wow, I don't feel tokenized because y'all are asking me what I want instead of telling me what I should have. Dr. Melly.
I think a way to explain it best is the way that it works. They didn't empower people, they gave them aids. It's like, they're like, here, come this and this. It's like, I'm sure you how to do it. So this seed money, and you can grow. When you're doing that empowerment thing, you take the power away. So that, I think that would be the best one. If agency, not the power.
And just to build on that before we go to the video, I would say what has become more relevant in that process, and I don't know if folks have seen like the $5 million ask of reparations in San Francisco, like that has forced a lot more coming together because the fractions within the Black community around like, no, don't ask for $5 million, now we're not gonna get nothing, and like all this other stuff, like people are creating space, intergenerational, cross-cultural, and understanding that being Black is not monolithic, and so that across ages, across genders, across neighborhoods, like the perception around that. So we've continued to build on that, and what has happened is the groundwork that started with that around like how do we talk to each other, how do we show up, and how do we hold community and city accountable has been deepened. So it's not perfect, but it is, there are a lot of the like old school Jesus meetings in, you know, the back office before we go into the front office. I also believe that we must educate how the world-rounded student. The students have great academic skills, resilience, mentally alert, and the community all come together.
If you can't release the anger, the fear, the pain, the hurt, the trauma, how do you think we're going to move forward? Because we don't deal with it. It goes into every aspect of our life, in our professional realm, in the community, in our homes. That trauma shows up in so many different ways that we can even quote.
Well, we as of right now, so if anybody else thinks, you know, language, give me a call. I'm on the alert. But that helps us go out and reach more people that are in a different community from a different background than we're from. So I know that Cynthia is bilingual. Cynthia, show off a little bit.
Yes, claro, hablo mucho español. So, bienvenidos esta noche. So, welcome everybody this night. That you're all here to hear what we have to share.
Absolutely.
So tonight we're here to, talk about financial education, keeping our people, helping our people become financially savvy. My goal, right? There's a lot of goals out there that I'm sure we put together with your resolutions and stuff. But number one is financial freedom, financial independence. I really want to see that, but overcoming, our financial obstacles that we have. So we're here to specifically talk about the goals and dreams that you may have that tie up with your finances. I think those are great questions, and I think absolutely that representation matters when it pertains to Black students or Black children. Being able to see themselves in media, ownership matters.
Today, we are the Common Goal Club, our Dream Forward, Dream Keeper Initiative. What's up, everybody? Sorry, I'm both sides of the conversation today. We are out in the community with our team. We are here at the Best Prep School. The narrative shift is uniting a community that's been impacted with drugs, gangs, violence, skill, and service to bring people together. They say there's no unity, there's no focus to do that work together and come together. Events like this show that no matter what's taking place in the community, people are still coming together and enjoying and celebrating the beautiful community that we live in, and we all here teaching and innovating. That was just a little bit of some of the events, some of the work that we've done, and it's really about, educating our community, really pushing forward mental health and the things that is important to our community, and all of that happens because of the Dream Keeper. So thank you guys, I hope you enjoy.
I would just say the last thing is that the Dreamkeeper Initiative is based around the collection of poems from Langston Hughes. And one of the main things around that, the title of the book is Dreamkeeper Initiative, but it's really, a lot of it has been about how do we answer the question from his poem Harlem, what happens to a dream deferred, right? And so this has been like the process and the ability to unpack. And it has been, even for that poem, the conversation with folks to be able to say, correct the narrative around like why the dream has been deferred. We have received an onslaught of nasty emails since reparations conversations have come. And the narrative, if you based it off of the emails that we get, is, you're not able to do anything because you're lazy, or because you should go back to Africa, or because you are stupid, like all the things that are coming. And so that narrative has been why we have developed this program, because if you buy into what you hear, then the hopelessness continues, and the idea that you want to change, not just the narrative, but the oppression disappears. I see there was one hand up.
I just wanted to ask what the poet's name was that you decided.
Oh, Eloise Greenfield. Yeah. So I will just end with Sai.
One more thing, because we are celebrating joy, it would not be right. We are from San Francisco. Today is 415 Day. That's our area code. So just know that back home in San Francisco, there's a huge party happening right now, but we wouldn't be anywhere else but here. But we want to wish everybody a happy 415 Day.
Thank you all so much. Go Warriors too.
That's what all.
Look this way.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to take, because I've got to introduce y'all to all these folks. I'm taking pictures, give me everybody's camera.
I want to see you too.
One, on three. 1, 2, 3. Again. 1, 2, 3. All right, give me camera. Here.
You want to do it all done?
Oh, you can go take this one from me? I appreciate it.
His book. That's what I'm
I know, yeah.
All right, over here first. I'm a child. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, you did? Okay. You want? I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Did you get it?
No.
You sure?
Yeah, I
Thank you so much.
much.
I want my selfie though, because Dr. Davis.
So, Dr. Ivy Tosin, come. Dr. Ivy Tosin.
Am I in North Carolina?
And so,
Yes. Look at me real quick.
Me too. I have the QR now. Okay.
Dr. Davis,
Oh,
forward.
yay.
Dr. Davis.
That's cute.
One more. 1, 2. If I don't document it, it'll never.
It didn't happen. You don't get it, it didn't
The
happen.
tree fell.
I'm going from the dream deferred to the dream deferred.
Hey, you know what?
The dream preferred.
Yes. Reason that I didn't realize. Yes, I'm sorry. His dream deferred to his I2 city. That's his narrative is going like, my dream deferred, so I2 city.
Oh, get ready. But but first year.
Okay. Okay, nice. I think this is the first one they're having in person since 2019. Yes. We did that one in 2019 in Korea.
That's where they did.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Hey. Thank you for sharing.
All right, Sai. Thank you for thinking of it. Totally forgot. That was beautiful.
Yeah,
That was real good. Yes.
Yeah,
Are we still live?
yeah, yes,
Oh
I'm
my
about to turn it off.
God.
Yeah, we just did our presentation. We had some technical issues, but we got through it. Great event today. We head off to the next one, so we'll go live shortly, and we'll see y'all.